The Twisted Strand. This is the most like fishing hat that I could find in my house. So thank you, mama, mother, mommy. My mom does also have proper like wading boots, like the rubber kind, but they're kind of dirty and I wouldn't want them in my room. So first, let me get my beef out of the way. Twisted Strand is categorized as mangrove in game, okay? A mangrove forest, or mangal, exists along a shoreline, okay? And the water is composed of both fresh water and salt water, okay? Like, that's the little concoction that's going on here. And that is what mangrove trees rely on. Do you see a stream, Dora? No, you don't, because there is no fresh water in Dredge. It is an ocean. God. All the other areas I can accept. Like, the islands could have resulted from any number of geological shifts. There is a volcano. There could be volcanic islands. Like, who knows? But again, and there's even like, there's magic in game. Like, I get it. But if you remove the magic, everything else is like completely realistic. But there's this one thing I can't. This all being said, Twisted Strand is probably my second favorite after Stellar Basin. I like them a lot. It's blanketed in this eerily comforting like mustard haze that creates this kind of unnerving feeling while also being, you know, beautiful and kind of comforting. It's nice. The main quest in Twisted Strand is gathering specific fish to make specific bait to bait these creatures called the mind suckers, so that this airman that's living there and has been stranded for X amount of years can blast those weirdos out of the sky. And then he gives you a relic that he dug up somewhere. Once you do that, Twisted Strand is pretty safe. You just have to be careful not to crash into things.
Let me tell you about the airman. I'm recording inside my closet because A, it's June, you know? And June is gay month. And I'm not in the closet anymore. So it's like, oh my god, look how far I've come. I'm sitting in front of the closet instead of inside it. And also because the airman section I originally recorded was dog shit. And I have to re-record it and didn't realize it until I was editing the video. So the airman is important because there are 2 theories regarding him. And I didn't think that they were significant enough. Oh my god, look, it's also like, it's a little like jellyfish. Can you focus on that, please? The jelly? Okay, I guess not. And we're in Dredge. Anyway, I didn't put them in the theory section because there's not a lot to Twisted Strand, and I felt that this was very important regarding the airman. There are also more logical conclusions than any like deep theories. So the first theory regards how all of the airman's squadron died. He does state in game that they crash landed because of the fog in Twisted Strand, and then the mind suckers drove them all crazy and killed them. That in and of itself is believable. You know, it could just be that if your mind is weak and you are not thinking straight, it's a lot easier to kill you. But there is an obelisk in Twisted Strand that might hint to something else much sadder happening. A man flees through the trees, bloodshot eyes wide with terror. He runs into a dead end. Cornered by the murky waters and his pursuer, he turns. A wooden spear flies and finds its mark. Now, it's very interesting that the obelisk never says who is holding the spear. It just says that the guy turns around and a spear finds its mark. Your brain does make the assumption, oh, well, a spear can only be thrown by a human. The only human mentioned is the guy that turns around, right? However, the obelisk doesn't specify if the man was the one throwing the spear. It could be that another unnamed person in this memory was the one doing that. It could be that the mind suckers drove the whole squadron mad and turned it into a sort of Hunger Games where they just didn't realize what they were doing. It could be that they all were hallucinating the mind suckers when it was in reality it was a real person. And I think that another important detail is the bloodshot eyes wide with terror. In Dredge, there is a game mechanic referred to as panic. It's what happens when you run into the fog. I've described it before, but long story short, when you run into the fog, you start hallucinating things, right? And the little icon at the top of the screen that shows you how panicked you are could be interpreted as bloodshot. So it would fit into the idea that the mind suckers have a sort of power connected to the fog that can be used to drive people crazy. That is a possibility. In game, they only directly attack you, but this could be a power that they used to have or that the aberrated fog just kind of facilitated in some way. There's also, this is a very small note, but the mind suckers are not actually creatures in and of themselves. They are parasites inside husks of some other creature. That is thanks to another obelisk in Twisted Strand. I'm not going to read the whole thing like I did, but just know that it is kind of the case of the zombie ants, if you've heard of those. It's a fungus that grows on ants and will kind of turn them into zombie ants. And I can't remember what it does, but it basically takes over their bodies. And I think they can do it with dead ants and alive ants. Don't quote me on that. I just know zombie ants. But they are just a parasite, and it could be that the parasite is an aberrated parasite because we don't know what things can become aberrated. Humans obviously go crazy, but they don't become aberrated. Animals can go crazy. You know, we see crabs, crustaceans, fish, manta rays. I don't know what animal manta rays specifically are in the bigger taxonomy. Sharks. I don't think that there are any plants that are aberrated in Dredge. You could argue the water sarlacc in Stellar Basin came from a spore. Spore and parasite to me could be close. So I think it's a very interesting case of the aberrated power, or the deity controlling the aberrated power having more control over life as we know it than we think. It couldn't be stretched farther than aquatic creatures, and maybe that's what the Iron Rig will tell us about. But the Iron Rig was already covered. My belief is that the airman was a fighter pilot for either Australia or New Zealand. I'm going to say New Zealand because Black Salt Games is in New Zealand, during World War I. You might make the erroneous assumption that because Dredge takes place in 1947, it does, I will explain that later, and World War II ended in 1945. Well, obviously he fought in World War II, like otherwise he'd be stuck there for 30 years. It's a very long time. World War I is way too far off, right? Like I said before, the airman's quest is to find this bait so that you can take down the mine suckers so that he can shoot them as revenge for his flight squadron that crashed and was then killed off by the mine suckers, right? You can see those planes around Twisted Strand, and they are, according to my historian father and my 14-year-old cousin who's a World War II kid and a World War I kid and a guns kid, those ones are clearly World War I era biplanes. By World War II, they had more singular wing plane. I can't remember what's like mono wing plane. Maybe. The airman is also obviously older. New Zealand and Australia had very strict rules on who they were accepting to fight in World War I and II. So an old man wouldn't make sense to be enlisted in the army. Even if you subtracted 7 years from his like visual age, because Buddy has white hair. 7 years, by the way, is the amount of time between when New Zealand and Australia declared war on Germany and when Dredge happens, 7-year span. He's not going to be young enough to qualify, in my opinion. So it would make more sense for him to have enlisted and fought in World War I because he would have been a much younger man. He would have made the cut. You might also disagree on account of the aberrated fog, which only appeared 20 years ago. There's not like any big evidence as to how it was 20 years ago. It's just someone states it in game and I missed it and I went back and I was like, oh, okay. The airman states that a fog brought them down. He never says what kind of fog. Twisted Strand is stated by other characters, specifically the mayor and the airman himself, that it is encompassed by a very thick fog. I don't want to keep saying fog so many times. So it could be that the aberrated fog isn't what brought them down. It was just the normal kind that just covers Twisted Strand. And I believe that the airman came in from the north. It doesn't matter if it's World War I or II, both the Pacific theater, which you could argue for World War II, and the European theater, where everything was happening in World War I, kind of, are both to the north of the DOQ. Both Twisted Strand and Devil's Spine are in the north, so it would make sense that that's like the first area he hits on his way to New Zealand. Could be that they got a little off course, could be that the DOQ is situated like right above New Zealand. I don't know. It's entirely possible that the airman squadron was just heading home from their post from World War I. Could be that the war ended, could be that they left in the middle of it. They just ran into a bunch of fog and ended up killing each other before they could ever get home, which is very screwed up and tragic considering that in war there's two possibilities. You either die or you kill others and you make it out alive. The airman squadron has probably seen or done terrible things, especially considering all the atrocities that were committed in World War I, only to confront new and completely incomprehensible horrors just trying to get home. I have been a little bit more serious in this section. I do apologize if it was a bit off-putting, but war isn't something that we can't understand like Cthulhu, okay? War is planned and executed by humans who are fully conscious of what they are doing. This is a long-winded way of me just saying that I believe that the airman was a New Zealand fighter pilot in World War I who grew old on an island all by himself, intent on avenging his dead comrades who never came home and probably faced a more forgiving fate than he did. Anyway, back to you standing up like 2 weeks ago. It took me a while to edit this. It took me a while to film this. I have a job. I'm busy.
So that's the airman. And there's one other NPC on Twisted Strand, which is the traveling merchant. And I'm going to tell you about her because she's in every single area except for the Marrows. I want to talk about her. She is my favorite character. She's very chipper and sweet. She's kind of teasing you when you get your shit fixed. She's just like, you need to be more careful. And you're like, okay. Like I said, every area except the Marrows, she has a pontoon with different names. So there's the Dusty Pontoon, the Blake Pontoon, the Starlight Pontoon, the Rickety Pontoon, and the Charred Pontoon if we're going clockwise. She sells you upgrades, she buys your fish, and she can do a bunch of stuff with your boat. She also likes weird fish. That's her quest, is she sends you to each area and she's like, hey, here's a really rare fish. There's only one of it. Could I see it? And you're like, yes, darling. Anything for you. I would like the option to marry her in game, but considering the fisherman's luck with women, she'd probably end up in Davy Jones' locker. And also a side note about the traveling merchant, my boyfriend was like, you know, it'd be really cool if like each pontoon was owned by a different person and it added some personality. And I was like, don't talk about my wife like that. But also, yeah, sure. Like that'd be really cool. Love you, babe. Twisted Strand definitely has the most frustrating altar, the aberrated altar, which is really easy to get, but it gives you the tendon rod, which is inconveniently like, it's just inconvenient. And it works for mangrove, oceanic, and shallow areas, so it's pretty much like a Twisted Strand exclusive. If you're okay with switching out your rods a lot, you'll be good with it. It's just, to me, it's bulky. Nothing else works with it, size-wise. Yeah, I'm sick of smog and easily preventable threats. Let's go. Oi, welcome to Gale Cliffs. We used to be a fishing hamlet before we engaged in unsustainable whaling practices and we killed all of them off. That's not true. I heard that the whales went away. What do you think unsustainable fishing practices do? I can't do a Scottish or an Irish accent, so that's my bastardized version of both. Gale Cliffs is my least favorite area, probably because the monster there. It's a giant serpent that randomly pops up, and if you're dredging or fishing, then whoopsie daisy, I guess you're fucked. So that's fun. Just about every time that I've died in Dredge, it's been because of this bitch. Like, the NPCs will tell you, oh, it's really slow, and like, you can outrun it. I can't outmaneuver it, and it's really hard to run in a bunch of little cliffs. So I don't know what you're talking about, Sheila. I don't know why I say Sheila. I don't know why it's Sheila. Gale Cliffs is, however, very interesting because of its lore and its area. I'm taking this off. Does my hair look good? My hair's mid right now, but like the hood was way too hot, so my apologies. Gale Cliffs is pretty interesting on account of its like individual lore. There's a little whaling town called Ingfell. Great name. I'm trying not to move my arms a lot because of the rustling. But Ingfell used to profit off of the whaling business until the whales ran off. Somehow, some way. Gale Cliffs also used to be a huge like pirating and smuggling hotspot, since there's, you know, the ships could hide in the nooks and crannies to outrun the law with a big iron on his hip. A big iron on his head. And there's even a little treasure chest behind a little waterfall, and you know I love a little treasure chest behind a little waterfall, okay? That's my thing. It contains a bunch of money, which is so Count of Monte Cristo coded. Side note, I hate it when people say, oh my god, that thing is so blank coded, and it's literally just because it reminds them of a specific aspect. Do not generalize one piece of media for the other. Like, don't be stupid. You're capable of critical thinking. Say, oh wow, that reminds me of that one scene of Count of Monte Cristo. Don't use generalized terminology to refer to a specific instance of something. Thank you. There's also a clutter of ruined buildings in the big like open bay area of Gale Cliffs, which has been broken down over the years by the serpent, you know, we're going through Gale Cliffs. Side note, I believe that ruins cannot be called ruins unless they're literally like ancient. Like yes, the ruins of a mall from like the 60s or 70s can be called the ruins, but a capital T and R in there? We gotta be talking ancient Greece, okay? To get the relic in Gale Cliffs, you have to get this crest that's in like the big lagoon at the back of Gale Cliffs, which is where this big serpent thing kind of sleeps, I guess. I don't think it sleeps. I think it just kind of hunts me. The crest belonged to two brothers who fought over it when their parents' inheritance was split, and the younger brother stole it, and he ran off with it, and then the serpent popped up, and he's like, I cannot return to Ingfell without that crest, even though My home is literally crumbling around me and I don't know how I get food. I guess he's built different, guys. I don't know. And I also guess I don't have a lot of shame because I would have been like, hey dude, I'm dying. It's been years. I love you. So I guess me and Prince Zuko aren't meant to be because I don't have a lot of honor. Does water even help lubricate your throat? The only other NPC in Gale Cliffs besides the traveling merchant and the brothers, by the way, the younger brother is the hermit, which is kind of funny that he was just like, yep, I'm a loser. 'Cause I'm afraid. And the older brother is called the Whaler. He gives you a bunch of dynamite. Anyway, again, the only other NPC is Resident of Ingfell. That's her name. Best dressed one. And she sends you on possibly the hardest quest, which is, hey, get me this eel that can only be found at the back of this area, which by the way, everything else is at the front of the area. There's a dock there, but you don't know that. You're like, oh my god, I have to be there and back by daytime before I get, you know, haunted by eyeballs. And then it has to be rotting. She wants a rotting conger eel. The fish and dredge will go from fresh to stale to rotting, and then they will literally just decompose into this useless like mush that you cannot sell. She's like, I want it right on the edge. It's a delicacy. Yeah. Sure. Fine. And Miss Resident of Ingfell, she also tells you about the old whaler Magran, who was a guy who found a scroll that said, hey, if you eat aberrated fish, there is eternal life in store for you. And he's like, cool. And he went a little cuckoo insane. Now, there's two NPCs in Dredge who could theoretically be Magran, and those are the fishmonger in the Marrows and the fanatic on Devil's Spine. The fishmonger, he asks you for an aberrated fish. He disappears for a whole day. He's so excited. Don't know what he was doing with the fish the whole day. On the other, the fanatic is literally waving around a scroll. It's like, he showed me the key to eternal life. And that introduced him to the delights of the deep. Don't know what those are. And he also has scales, so pretty sus. My bet is on the fanatic because, again, he has a scroll. You don't see the fishmonger with the scroll, but he's probably illiterate. Gale Cliffs is the crab area in that if you zoom out of the whole area, it looks like a crab, which I think is pretty neat. And as such, the altar is crab themed. You end up with the mouth of the deep, which is a crab crate. Net? Cage? Crab cage? I don't know. Which is super useful when catching the aberrated crabs for paint. That's a side quest with the painter in Little Marrows. He's like, I'll make your boat pretty. But to unlock a bunch of other paints, you have to get 2 aberrated crabs from each area. It's pretty hard in that it's, you know, it's randomized, you can't control it. But the mouth of the deep is a very solid item. It gives you a little aberrated boost, 10 out of 10. And it also looks like the Dune popcorn bowl. And it reminds me of my Dune popcorn bowl. And I only got to use it once before they asked me to leave the theater. It's really sad. Anyway, that's Gale Cliffs. Whew. Is anyone feeling kind of sweaty? It's almost like we're coming up on the Devil's Spire! Ah! Wait, I messed up. I like to think of Dredge and the Marvel Cinematic Universe existing in one reality, not because it's a compliment to Dredge in that such a profitable and market-savvy company such as Marvel/Disney would let its innocent and magical characters exist in the same world as infinitely more well thought out than Dredge's. This is a joke, mouse. Don't come into my house or up my clock. Because I like the idea that the devil's body actually makes up an entire universe. Like, you know, in Thor Ragnarok, Sakaar, the like junk planet, it has the devil's anus and then the devil's spine. I almost messed it up. By the way, I only have one red glove because this was for a Halloween costume. I was Bloody Mary and we were at a party and we were gonna get in a car and then there were these other girls and we were like, oh, can we like go with you? And me and my friends and they're like, sure. And then I was like holding hands because of course we were two drunk girls, we were holding hands. We were girls and they were holding hands. She was like, can I hold? I was like, sure. And then I was like, no, please don't do that. And she ended up living with her friends and in the process she ended up yanking off my other gloves. So other girl who was at a Halloween party in 2023, I really hope that you kept my glove. I miss it. Anyway, back to the video. Devil's Spine is undoubtedly the hardest area. It's the last area that a player should go. It's hard to maneuver through. You have to go slowly. You need a lot of supplies and abilities to thrive, you know? And the area's specific monster, the Unseen Mother and her ravenous children, I'm not exaggerating, by the way, those are their actual names, are always a threat. See, the ravenous children are these little shits that chase you down if you get close, and they slow you down if too many of them catch on to you, and they can only be scared away by literal boiling water in their faces. That's pretty accurate to actual kids. They're absolutely everywhere. You cannot outrun them unless you're on the outskirts of Devil's Spine. And this is due to the half-sunken Grecian, Macedonian ruins, if you will. Oh my god. I always forget how different seeing things without these glasses are, because everything looks blue when you take them off at night. Oh boy. A black and red horror game that would do numbers on me mentally. But the ruins are all around. They make up the main area. The actual like spine, the volcano never explodes, which I think is a massive bummer. The 411 on this area is that there used to be an ancient civilization that was destroyed by a natural disaster. Wonder where we've heard of a volcano destroying an ancient city before. Or by the natural disaster destroying their lighthouse, which kept back the horrors, and the horrors destroyed it. The civilization knew about the aberrations, or at least one really big aberration, the Leviathan or the deity. Maybe both. The Leviathan is the monster that will eat you if you go too far off the map, and it is the one that eats you in the good ending. And a little tidbit about the Leviathan, helpful little obelisk, we love their little obelisks, it confirms that it used to visit the lighthouse on Devil's Spine before it was destroyed. The obelisk actually says that it called out softly to it with a guttural song, which I think is kind of sweet. Can you imagine if all the creatures in Dredge could be controlled by really bright light? You know, like moths? Actually, it's kind of scary in the open ocean. Like, can you imagine looking down from your deck and seeing these endless eyes peering up at your headlights? A writhing mass of fish squirming as far as the eye can see? Because I can. That sounds really cool. I also think that the civilization worshipped the deity, mainly because of its name, you know, and because a big theme in Lovecraft's works are humans or half humans worshipping an infinitely larger being that they do not understand. Otherwise, the deity is not named anywhere. It is listed as such on the fan wiki. I don't know where they got that name, but it is my belief that they worshipped it. That's my thought. The main quest here is to help the fanatic with his little ritual by catching specific fish, putting them in 3 crabs, and receiving a fathomless flame, which you put in the hands of 3 statues. I can't fathom what that's about. The fanatic does his little thing and poof, disappears, leaving behind the final relic, which is a pocket watch. Remember, he could be Magran, the dude who found a scroll with the secret to immortality. The fact that he poofed could mean that he was transported elsewhere. I wonder where that elsewhere is. I wonder. I know, I'm going to tell you about it later. His disappearance could also mean that there is a loophole in the immortality clause. He will never die in the mortal, non-aberrated realm. I've always said not to trust Eldritch promises, okay? They don't provide dental coverage. I don't know why. The altar in Devil's Spine is the final shrine. You remember that I mentioned the fathomless flames? Well, once you've done all 3, this is where you get the last item from an altar. They're not that hard to complete, except for the one where I had to face my biggest brand new fear. You can get everything from Devil's Spine. The end result is pretty worth it, which is the encrusted talisman. Talisman? Yeah. Which raises your chance of catching something aberrated. The Blackstone DLC does give you a smaller item called the Sign of Ruin, which does the exact same thing for a higher level. But if you're not willing to shell out $4.99 for it, you'll be fine. Besides, at this point in the game, you've probably finished all the like location-specific quests, and you're probably about to finish the main quest, so the talisman is a little perk for the completionists out there, so that's very well paced in my opinion. Note, New Zealand apparently does have volcanoes. It has a lot of volcanoes, so that's definitely the biome that it's based around. There's not a specific one that I can point out to, but it's just there's volcanoes in New Zealand, fun fact. Anyway, now that we're done with the areas, fun fact that really ties the whole spookiness thing together. Devil's Spine is the only area where you cannot see the lighthouse in the Marrows, okay? No matter what area you are, you can see like this light off in the distance, even in Twisted Strand through all the fog, but you can't in Devil's Spine, which is because of Steel Point. Remember those big 3 islands that I was like, that should be a different section, but I understand why they didn't do that. It blocks the light, which is a very good touch. This is a place where the light does not reach, you know? Like, yes, their lighthouse is out, but it's also metaphorical. It makes it a lot more ominous. Like, Devil's Spine is definitely the most ominous area. You're trespassing on what used to be a powerful city, one that could repel an otherworldly force. It's a shame then that its downfall was caused by the tragically human nature of building a home on top of an active volcano. I'm looking at Pompeii. I'm not looking at it straight on. More of a side glance. The same way that the Romans built a city on the side of an active volcano, okay? Like, it's on the side. Anyway, that's all the regions and mini quests. Let's go on to something less concrete and more imaginary, which is my mental health. Let's get on to something less concrete and more imaginary, such as my aspirations in life, you know. That's depressing. So there's a lot of things that when you play Dredge, you don't know, that are considered the bare minimum, like what year is it? Possible location, you know, like why are there eldritch abominations here, right? These are not questions that have to be uncovered, that you need to go into the security guidebook or anything like that. You just have to pay attention. I wanted something to like gesture with because it's like the smart person section, and I've always wanted to use this to like point at this will come into play later. Don't even look at that. Don't even look at that. Look at my cool Lego set. You know, I rebuilt it so that I can put my Switch inside it. I've never played like that, but isn't that cool? I have answers to all of the questions above, as well as some other ones that have been niggling my brain. Let me know if you have any other thoughts or theories. I would love to hear them. I love to talk to people. That's a lie. So first off, when does Dredge happen? When I first wrote this script, I did a whole bit about, well, we know that World War I happened, and I was analyzing the crashed fighter plane. I didn't even know that the airman was a, like, you know, from World War I, you know, that whole bit that I talked about before. I didn't even know that. I was just like, well, we know World War I happened. But then I reread the notes that were left in the bottles, and I realized that they were dated. And apparently at some point in the game, they said that, oh, everything started happening 20 years ago. And I didn't remember that. So, but yeah, there is a year when Dredge happens. It's explicitly stated in-game that the cask containing the Book of the Depths, Jesus, was dredged up 20 years ago. And that places Dredge solidly in 1947, like I stated before, thanks to Julie's diary entry where she states that the night the coffin was dredged up was September 14th, 1927. This also lines up with the airman. It could be that the DOQ, again, the Dredge Ocean Quadrant, I almost forgot what it was. It's kind of a Bermuda Triangle situation that his squadron ran into on the way home to New Zealand. Like we stated before, they ran into fog. It was not the spooky dooky kind of fog. It was just the Twisted Strand being very, very spooky and weird, naturally. That leads me to the second question that most people have when they play Dredge. Where does Dredge happen? Normally, if you play the game and you don't know, that's okay. You assume, oh, well, this is kind of, again, Bermuda Triangle situation. Like, there's a Mongol, there's an active volcano, there's Beachy Basin. Like, within a day's tour travel. And I know there's no place on Earth that is possible, especially in the middle of the ocean. However, I'm going to suspend my disbelief and believe that is based around New Zealand for 2 reasons. More like 1.5. Yeah, for 1.5 reasons. So, reason 1, Black Salt Games is New Zealand based, and all of Dredge's regions represent actual ecosystems within New Zealand. Like I said, Stellar Basin is probably based around the Bay of Islands for the bioluminescence. There are volcanoes, beaches, actual mangrove forests with the salt water and the fresh water, and there are glaciers. That's right, you didn't think there were any glaciers in New Zealand, did you? You thought it was going to be all Hobbit imagery and hate crimes against Indigenous people. You didn't see the rapidly disappearing glaciers. I did. Basically, these ecosystems could all theoretically exist, just not in such close proximity to each other, but we're fine with that because we can suspend our disbelief. I understand why they couldn't make the settings bigger. Dredge isn't a huge, ambitious game with sprawling dialogue trees and a lot of different areas that you can explore. Like, there are, but like, it's pretty limited. There's 6 areas. However, if the DLCs increase in size and in quality the same as the Pale Reach, I think that the playable area of Dredge could be so much bigger. It could be like like you could have areas like kind of expanding outwards. Like you have this ring of like the main 5 in the Marrows, including Pale Reach, and then you have like another ring of islands like sprawling outwards and outwards, and it could be a spiral to show your descent into madness. The main storyline that you play now could be like the collector plot line, and then the next one could be more like discovering the origin of the aberrated creatures and how to defeat them forever or something like that. Like, hire me, Black Salt Games. I'm sorry, I got excited there. I literally came up with that just now, and I know that it would be a lot of work and time, but it'd be really cool. My second reason, my half reason, It's so hot in here. I can't lean back against that. My second reason is, again, the pilot, the airman. Like I explained before, I think that he was fighting in World War I. Squadron comes back on the way home to New Zealand, and that's why it's a half reason, because I already explained it. But yeah, it would make sense considering the origins of Black Sail Games. It's entirely plausible that he was a New Zealand pilot, you know? So that's the half reason. The final reason is very, very interesting. What exactly is the origin of the aberrated creatures? They're wacky and wild, and there's crazy things on Earth, but like, I refuse to believe that you could have something called a void eye existing in real life. Like what do you mean there's a black hole in your little eyeball? They could just be a cosmic consequence of the fishermen removing the Book of the Depths from the ocean, or naturally occurring phenomena, abominations that were summoned by the book. Basically, the two options are they were already there, or they happened because of the fishermen. I know that I kind of buried the lead and was like, oh, well, you caused all this. This was all your fault. There's a possibility that it wasn't. I don't know. It's confusing. I will explain. My theory is that they were from another dimension. My reason for assuming such a thing is A, our impossible notes. You remember when I said take those bottles out of your comically oversized pocket and put those letters in the back? Here are the letters. We have already stated that Julie was sending letters somehow, some way, out into the DOQ after her death. She said it was cold. Expected the fisherman to write. Didn't think he would though. And these letters are not dated in game. They literally have little question marks. And the last dated letter that Julie sends is from when they dredge up the casket. So these are impossible notes. Another example of these impossible notes comes from the researcher's sister. Her sister died a while ago, and all of a sudden she's starting to get these notes from her sister after her death, and they're scattered around her lab. They're written in the present tense, like, hey girl, I heard you're a woman in STEM, sorry I couldn't come to your graduation, I was dead. They're written like she's alive. This also connects to more information provided by one of the obelisks, which says, blackness, a crimson rift opens in the void. Dreadful silhouettes drift through in a procession of teeth and tentacles. After the last grotesque figure emerges, a membrane spreads over the fissure. A distant groan emanates from the space beyond. A rift, you say? Opening in the dark? The space beyond? Sounds like another dimension to me. I don't know about you. Like, this is like capital E elsewhere. You know what I mean? This existence of another dimension also connects to a pantheon of old gods that exists within Lovecraft stories. We've already established that Dredge takes inspiration from Lovecraft. It's literally in their official description. And one detail that people forget about the gods of Lovecraft is that they cannot exist on Earth due to being so immense and powerful. I saw somewhere somebody describing them as sixth dimensional, which I can't even conceive of. To me, I'm gonna picture it like cubism, but like it's real. You know what I mean? Cubism is every angle all the time. You could say it's fourth dimensional, I don't know. It's just, that's how I'm picturing it. To quote Lovecraft himself, the old ones were, the old ones are, and the old ones shall be. Not in the spaces we know, but between them. They walk serene and primal, undimensioned and to us unseen. That right there, by the way, is from the Dunwich Horror. Recommend it if you can take Lovecraft being so classist. It literally gave me a headache. For some reason, all the uneducated people, or the poor people, they're obviously the same people, their dialogue is spelled phonetically. When you spell something phonetically, it's like instead of spelling hello, which is spelled, you know, H-E-L-L-O, you spell it like H-E-L-L-O-W, hello. It's spelled how it sounds. That's pretty interesting. However, it's only applied to lower class people. Lovecraft really covered the basis of all the is. Okay, he's racist, he's classist, he said bibbity bobbity bitch, I hate all of you, except me, a white man from Massachusetts. Basically, this is what the quote is saying. These beings are outside reality. They cannot exist in their full forms to us, but they can nest in the cracks. It could be that Julie and the researcher's sister fell into those cracks when they died, or maybe that the deity's dimension, the deity's dimension, look at that alliteration, is kind of like an afterlife, either or. Maybe because they died to the ocean, that's why they ended up there. It could be that because these dimensions are ruled by beings that are so unknowable to humans that the humans cannot perceive them. Julie just says she is cold and she is alone. Maybe that's a result of her not being able to perceive it. Like, this is a 6th dimensional dimension, okay? She's a fisherman's wife. Her only flaw. It could be that it was just a cold void. We don't know. However, I think that the existence of another dimension is plausible due to her existing elsewhere. This isn't just like her popping into consciousness when the relics are being collected. There's a note that's specifically before that. She is somewhere. I think that that, along with the evidence from the obelisk, could very much be proof that there is another dimension that the aberrated creatures are coming from. Our second theory, this one's more off the cuff because I came up with it while recording. I was like, oh, come on. I personally believe the other dimension theory more. I think that makes sense. It's in line with Lovecraft stories and themes while also having enough proof in game. The other theory is that Earth is weird. There's a lot of proof for this, unfortunately. The Dredge animated trailer in particular shows a very different version of events than what is hinted at in game when it comes to how the casket was dredged up. In game, it's implied that the sailor, why did I call him a sailor? The fisherman just kind of found it and was like, wow, this is crazy. There was no existence of aberrated creatures beforehand. The serpent is stated to just have popped up one day. It's never stated when, so we could chalk it up to casket being dredged out, all the aberrated creatures appearing. The stellar basin creature could have happened naturally. A spore might have been able to grow that large, as well as the creatures in Twisted Strand, actually parasites inside a larger host's body. So those creatures could exist. It could just be that this area is just a little weird. However, the animated game trailer shows the fisherman going to one of the obelisks, specifically one of the obelisks, and dredging something up there. Oh girl, me when I dredge. And when the camera like pans down, it shows a bunch of aberrated, specifically aberrated fishes swimming around it. That says these creatures have already existed. They were not a consequence of this one object being removed from where it is supposed to be. Now they're just taking revenge. They didn't come from another dimension. They always been here, which screws up that theory. It screws it up very well. And it also implies that the fisherman was searching for these powers because he goes to the obelisk. It could be that he was just like, wow, this is crazy. But it seemed very intentional in the game trailer. I don't know. The Pale Reach also contributes to this theory in that the glacier appears. The entirety of the Pale Reach comes back. When you talk to the traveling merchant in the Pale Reach, she's like, well, you know, this glacier just popped up. It could have come from anywhere, which apparently is true. You know, glaciers can come and go as they please. So it could be that the glacier of the Pale Reach was already in the DOQ and then it like went away and then it came back. However, it could also be that it came from an icier region that was also aberrated, went to the DOQ, went off somewhere else, and then went back to the DOQ. Also, very important note, when the crew went to discover the Pale Reach, it was years ago. Like, it was in the 1800s. This is happening in the 1900s. This has been happening for a while. The aberrated creatures have been around for a hot sec. The ancient civilization worshipped aberrated creatures. The Leviathan existed. While the Leviathan is stated to have come out from the waters to visit it, it could be that it came out from its dimension. Could be that the gateway is in the ocean somewhere. The other piece of evidence is what I said before about the water sarlacc in Stellar Basin. It says that it reaching down into what lies beneath, implying that there's an aberrated power either underground or like very deep in the water. Deep water is very, very different from like what we think of as ocean life. There's a lot of translucent creatures. There's the big fin squid, which is my favorite creature. Everything is larger and things just look wackier down there. So it could be exaggerated metaphor of like, wow, look how creepy, wacky things are. And that's where the aberrated creatures come from. Yeah, there's just these two theories just split the world in half. They have completely different evidence for both. I also think one more piece of evidence for my dimensional theory is the fanatic saying eternal life awaits me when he does this little ritual. Again, you're worshiping this deity that exists in a realm different than yours. It could be that you're being just brought over to the deity's realm and living forever there, or it's just kind of like, well, you never died in real life. That counts. I would love to believe this. I think this is really cool. I think it lines up with Lovecraft's philosophy. The second one is also plausible. They really screwed me up with the animated trailer. The Pale Reach, I could work into this, but I give up, pretty much. These are reasons why there could be aberrated creatures. I'm gonna take my band-aid off. I like somehow cut my nail, like skin, right on top of the nail with a nail file. It's a really inconvenient injury. I get a lot of those. But anyway, fish, what a perfect segue into telling you about my dredge fish classification system. Yes, this is not really a section. It's just I categorize the fish. And I'm gonna tell you about them now, and you get to actually see the fish and dredge. Isn't that neat? Isn't this so symbolic of like how we're talking about like the ocean and like the fish inside it? So this here classification puts all the aberrated fishable fish in dredge as well as the crabs into 5 categories, which are hosts, radiated, impossibles, evil, zombies, and rocks. The hosts are always implied or shown or explicitly told to have some kind of egg inside, twinsies, or some sort of embryo. There is a creature that is going to come out of this creature and not naturally. These are the brood squid, the host eel. No, I didn't take that name, but what a smart coincidence. The cyclopean flounder, kind of the riddle flounder, meh. The scoring base, the ruptured vessel, me when I rupture a vessel, the enthralled stonefish, and the bulbous toothfish. Again, these beings are explicitly stated to have another being inside them in its pre-birth form. These could be one of the ways that the aberrated creatures reproduce, possibly. You know, they get hijacked by their maker using their bodies as incubators, which is so screwed up. The radiated category is basically the fish that are too weird for natural reasons. Like these could just be Chernobyl babies. Their bodies are covered in boils. They could have too many eyes. Like there's a lot of repeated features, such as a lot of mouths or too many teeth, too many legs, stuff like that. Some of these are all of the aberrated mackerels and cods, but not the fanged cod. The Medusa octopus, the gazing shark, the entangled crab, the gleaming mullet, the twisted shark, the charred sunfish, and the thawed ice fish. Oh my god, they're like on 2 sides of the same coin because they like the charred and it's a sunfish and the thawed ice fish. Whatever, you don't care. The zombies are the next category. They're what I think happens to the husks of the hosts after they have served their purpose. Their body is ripped apart and it's drifting into the depths of the sea before being zapped to life and continuing whatever fish would do if they didn't have any aspirations. Some of them want to be tap dancers. You didn't know that. Rats can cook, fish can tap dance. Listen to me. They're always stated to not have any consciousness or like individual life, but they're never aggressive as a result. This differentiates them from the evil category, which I will get to. These are the voltaic grouper, the flayed mackerel, the bearded mackerel, the decayed blackmouth, the withered ray, the perished loose jaw, the consumed grouper, the decrepit viperfish, and the skeletal moonfish. Very neat. Note, when I said before that all the normal mackerels were radiated and then these ones were different, that's because there are other types of mackerels, and the aberrated version of the different types of mackerels are the ones I'm talking about there, just to clear that up. The rocks category exists because I think it's silly. Like, logically, the creatures in this list should fall in the impossibles section because they shouldn't be able to swim, but calcification and petrification are some really cool phenomena, and this is my list. I made it up. I put in the work, you didn't. So, rocks. These include the shard ray, the sprouting eel, the shattered wreckfish, the bony wreckfish. That's kind of sad. The calcified snailfish. Did you see calcification? That's what I said. Yeah. The ossified cerebum, coolest name by the way, that's the coolest named fish. The beaked moonfish, and the fractalline icefish. Next, we have the impossibles, which sounds like a shitty dystopia name. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, this sounds like one of the knockoffs of like Divergent. Like, oh, I'm a Divergent and I'm specialer than you. Like, hire me and I will write you a shitty YA teen dystopia. It will be so bad. It will have horrible world building, but you know what? You get to choose what house you're in. Isn't that neat? These fish just simply cannot exist They cannot move, they cannot eat. They made me stare at my screen. They made me stare at my screen with like squinted eyes and just like an increased urge to check my pulse, just to like make sure there's blood in there, because like, well, oh, what do you mean? Impossible geometry, which is also a hallmark of Lovecraft stories. He's always like non-Euclidean geometry, and apparently he's trying to use that to say that the geometry isn't physically possible, but non-Euclidean geometry is something that does exist, and it's like normal, so I don't even know. Just their bodies they just don't make sense. Okay. They're also the coolest creatures because the designers were clearly given free reign. With these, I just want you to give me an impossibility, okay? If you ever read Ever After High, there's a note where like the White Queen from Wonderland, she's like, name 6 impossible things before breakfast. If you knew Ever After High, you would know that, but you don't. These ones are the Void Eye, the Blood Snapper, the Entwined Mullet, the Vortex Interloper, Twinned Eels, Tattered Mackerel, Defaced Skate, the Collapsed Viperfish, the Glaring Sunfish, the Astral Icefish, and the Grizzly Shark. Next section is evil. It's in their DNA. It's like the, oh my god, what are the creatures in Lord of the Rings? The like guys that were made out of the mud, you know, that they're like automatically evil out the womb. I really hate that character trope that is like, yeah, their race is evil. That's so cool, dude. Like, where did you come up with that? They're explicitly described as violent and aggressive, but that doesn't stop them from being stupid and biting a metal hook in the middle of the ocean. I would like it to be noted that they are stated to always be doing things at the cost of their own bodies, ripping themselves apart, for example. So they're really just mindlessly attacking anything, which in concept is terrifying, but these are also very small fish that, again, are stupid. These are the fanged cod, the barbed eel, the black grouper, the gnashing perch, the translucent sturgeon, the bursting anglerfish, the savage barracuda, the grinning gar, which is really cool. I think that'd be a cool like mob boss name, the grinning gar, the razormouth tuna, and the hinged wolffish. Any aberrated creatures that do not fall into these categories are simply just like sinister, spooky, or they just seem like they could be real life inhabitants of the ocean. Low-key, a lot of these fish could be real due to like a genetic defect. Like the ocean's already weird. Like I wouldn't put it past these. There's also these ones that I'm gonna put on screen. I hate them. My ball fell off. Not my balls. Mean crabs are chill because they can't walk towards me fast enough for me to freak out, and they can't like face me on and I can just be like, whoo. But daddy long legs crabs are just like, ew. And also this bitch, what do you mean grown fat by the countless corpses that rest in the deep? Like, I love a scavenger. Love it when you eat roadkill, but like, what do you mean? Also, like, the harbinger of sick mercy for lost souls is kind of a banger line, but like, you're like a fish. But yeah, those are all the different types of fish in dredge and crabs. My bad, guys. Love you. They're all really cool. I really want to know what they taste like though. I would love to dissect one. I'm not even built like that, but just like, ooh, you got like a bunch of little heads on you, but you already have, like, that's so neat. I took my hat off because Lovecraft is so serious and he takes himself so seriously for a dude that writes about his little creatures that I was like, okay, well, he wouldn't like my Bass Pro hat. And I'm again so embarrassed that my hair looks this bad right now. It's fine. So I have my Lovecraft book that's just gonna sit here on my leg in case I need to like the book. Anyway, this little section is me being a Lovecraft nerd, and it isn't a critique of Dredge's interpretation of Lovecraft so much as the general public's understanding of what makes a Lovecraft story. I would also like to preface this by saying that me and Lovecraft are not chilling. I'm gonna put these up. I think he's an excellent writer because he wrote horror about things that he was scared of, which is something that I believe more people should do if they are creating horror stories. Fear is much more visceral when it is made by someone that is scared about what they're writing about. Like, for example, there was a guy that worked on one of the Silent Hill games. In the beginning, there was a scene where a bunch of dogs jumped through a window and attacked him, but the dude was scared of dogs. So they did a test screening and he turned away and they were like, what are you doing? Like, you need to see us. And he's like, I'm scared of dogs. Why would I look at that? You know what I mean? He was a piece of shit though. Massive piece of shit. Don't like Lovecraft. What's the worst name that you could give a black cat? I can't say it. You're about to learn a fun fact. Anyway, Lovecraft stories normally feature at least 4 of the following elements on my bingo card. You didn't bring your... You didn't bring your bingo card? I specifically made a bingo card for you to... Why didn't you bring your bingo card? Oh my... So these are the following elements that make up a Lovecraft story. I was, again, reading through this whole book, and at one point it was feeling really sluggish because, again, there is a lot of stuff that reading in the 21st century, you're just like, how is this a story element? And his writing isn't about action. Lovecraft prefers to just tell you the story and for you to be horrified by the story. So there's not a lot of like, whoom, you know, in half of his stories. The other half do kind of have that. So I made a bingo board because I was bored. I made a bingo board because I was bored. So these are an educated, white, wealthy, and skeptical narrator, aquatic or reptilian looking monsters, horrors that cannot be described or understood. Lovecraft will then proceed to describe these horrors. Sci-fi elements, human science failing to explain supernatural objects, kind of like in the Equestria Girls movie where Sunset Shimmer is like running tests on the other human ponies, and then, you know, the is it an EKG monitor that like checks the heartbeat? I think it is. Anyway, she uses one of those and then it turns into like a heart or something. It's kind of like that, but instead of, you know, hearts, it's the horrors, capital H. Another one is creatures plan to take over the human race. Lower class people's dialogue spelled phonetically. The narrator goes mad or commits. That was the first story I read. Wait, what's it called? Hold on. I don't remember its name. Dagon. Yeah, mild trigger warning for Lovecraft stories besides, you know, the obvious stuff. There is mentioned in a lot of them. In Dagon, literally it starts out with the dude being like, oh my god, I've seen too much. And then he tells you what he's seen and he's like, oh my god, I must go. At least one use of the word blasphemous. Oh, I hit the wall. That's necessary because it matters to me. Okay, and it makes sense, okay, because it's like, it's an affront against God, and you know, because they're gods, and it has so much meaning, guys, I promise. Native Americans standing on business. Guys, we know that there's a ghost up there, and then she disappears, and there's a blue light, and we know that. And we're simply just not gonna go on there. And you stupid white researcher, you can go up there all you want and maybe come back, probably not. We're gonna stay over here and save your ass for the other 364 days out of the year. Mention of non-Euclidean geometry, like I said, that is an actual type of geometry, but he's just kind of trying to say it had impossible angles. What do you mean an impossible angle? Like every single angle exists. Non-white cultists, I feel like I don't have to explain that, but in the Call of Cthulhu, literally they go into detail about the ethnicities of all the people that were found to be cultists of Cthulhu, which is so interesting. The bulk of the story is basically exposition because a lot of the times it's a guy being like, this is what I have seen, and it's literally like all exposition. The world does not end. A lot of the times, for example, in the Call of Cthulhu, Cthulhu's kind of like the babysitter for the other old ones, and once he's been awoken, he's about to wake up the other old ones, but you don't actually see the world end. It kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger, but it's not a cliffhanger because the pacing is just whatever. Underground cities, there are several of those, and there's a free racism space. This is not Dredge, okay? The only categories that Dredge fulfills, you could argue that the fact you're using fishing rods to kind of defeat these creatures in a way, and the fact that the researcher, again, you can use kind of a generator to scare off the water sarlacc, you could say that that's kind of sci-fi. Fishing rods are technology, guys. Aquatic or reptilian looking creatures, obviously. You could say that the narrator is definitely like visually white. It's implied that he is wealthy because he was left this island. Blackstone Island is his. He could be educated, but I'm really just going off of the fact he's wearing a suit as the collector. There is a crazy cultist that tries to summon the deity using the rituals of the ancient culture to understand the horrors. The deity and its like aberrated creatures do kill people, but like it doesn't seem like it's planned. It's more of just like, you took my fucking bedside reading. And the deity kind of is practically incomprehensible. It's never explained, but it's not in the way that Lovecraft sets it up. You either get vague explanations or you don't get any at all, and you're kind of going off what you think, which is different from Lovecraft being like, I can't explain it and now I will. You could even argue the insanity, the panic mechanic, the panic mechanic. Could function as the horrors that cannot be understood since you start hallucinating, but most of the horrors you encounter are just weird. Like, that's just an overgrown squid. What are you talking about? And they are bad weird, but I don't feel like a crushing realization that I'm nothing more than a flesh mass, except for that one shot with the water sarlacc, you know? Your shit is not wild, it's just unimaginably large. This isn't to bash the devs and their marketing at all. Lovecraft stories are perceived very, very differently in pop culture, and to call something Lovecraftian, it normally means that it just has to be very large and visually oceanic. Why are my Discord notification going off? By that metric, Dredge is really Lovecraftian. This is just me being a picky little freak. I love good old knockoff Lovecraftian stuff. I feel bad saying that. No, I just think it works very well for Dredge. So, what'd you think? Do you want to get Dredge? Because you should. Like I said, Pale reaches out. This is what the intro looks like. And Iron Rig is coming out soon. I'm unimaginably hyped. It's a very good price for how much thrill and how much joy you get out of the game. I recommend it for anyone that's looking for a game right now that isn't too stressful, but it still gives you that little adrenaline rush. Cool designs, very easy mechanics. There's no official wearable / like decorative merch for Dredge. However, Black Salt Games is giving out something that is even better. If you go to the Dredge website, there's actually free, high quality, like HD wallpapers that have like cool art related to the art of Dredge. Some of it is the stuff from the animated trailer, and some of it are these like really cool like postcards for each area that have like a normal version and like an aberrated version, and I think it's just so neat. They're completely free, by the way, 100% free, and it's a really cool and like cheap way of marketing, because then you have it on your screen and someone's like, oh my god, where'd you get that? What is that? And you say, like the clever intellectual you are, it's Dredge. A cozy fishing game about the horrors underneath the waves. And they look at you like you're crazy because you're telling them about your hyperfixation, you won't shut up. Props to Black Salt for all their passion and their effort, and thank you Team 17 for publishing 2 of my most favorite games ever. You definitely liked this video, or at least you liked all my wall art, so give me a thumbs up for either of those things. Share this with someone who likes video essays about someone's special interests, or just tell someone to play Dredge. Play Dredge yourself, it's great. I don't know if I'll make another video like this, but I love making stuff about stuff that I like and yapping until the sun goes down. And also seeing as how I got this far as like filming this video for like over probably like 5 hours, because I filmed it one day and then my knees really hurt, and also there was a lot of like audio problems. So I've been refilming the whole thing. I got this far. I might as well keep going. I have a lot more games that I would like to talk about, but if there are any that you would like me to talk about and yap for hours about, let me know. Comment about it. My name's been Sophia. I'm the monster under your bed. Thank you for letting me talk about Dredge and the horror of the unknown. Bye!